I wish I had the strength to get rid of him." Those words didn't come from an angry producer or a bitter screenwriter. They came from Ron Howard, the man Hollywood calls its kindest director. The same Ron Howard who turned child stardom into directorial mastery. The same man who's built a career on patience, respect, and collaboration. But in a rare moment of candor with Rolling Stone, his gentle demeanor cracked. He named 6 actors, 6 names that still carry weight, controversy, and secrets that nearly destroyed his career. Some caused international boycotts. One forced the Vatican to demand an apology. Another made him cover up abuse. Who were they? And which one pushed America's nicest director past his breaking point? If you're ready to see behind Hollywood's perfect facade, hit that subscribe button, because what you're about to hear changes everything you thought you knew about the golden age of cinema. Tom Hanks, the friend who turned his back. Ron Howard never expected betrayal to come wearing America's most trusted smile. But on a summer morning in 2022, when Tom Hanks sat down with the New York Times, he delivered words that cut deeper than any critic's review ever could. Hoy! Nonsense scavenger hunt type nonsense. That's how Hanks described the Da Vinci Code franchise, the trilogy Howard had devoted over a decade of his life to creating. Not just any films, but projects Howard had defended against religious boycotts, government bans, and death threats from fundamentalist groups. To understand the weight of this dismissal, one must rewind to 2005. Howard had spent 6 months negotiating with the French Ministry of Culture just to film inside the Louvre. The crew worked 18-hour days. Hanks himself was so exhausted he changed costumes in the Mona Lisa gallery just to stay on schedule. When the film premiered at Cannes in 2006, Catholic organizations demanded boycotts. Egypt, Jordan, Syria, Lebanon, and Pakistan banned it entirely. Ron Howard, the amiable everyman director, suddenly found himself at the center of a global religious firestorm. Through it all, Hanks remained the franchise's face, but cracks began showing. By angels and demons, their once-tight friendship had cooled. A crew member told Vanity Fair they weren't the same friends anymore. Hanks's 2022 comments weren't just film criticism. They were a public rejection of Howard's vision, his passion, his decade of work. The trilogy had grossed over $1.5 billion worldwide, yet its lead actor called it meaningless commerce. Some saw it as Hanks distancing himself from commercial projects to rebuild his artistic reputation. Others saw something darker, a calculated erasure of the past to serve the present. For Howard, it was simpler and more painful. It was the moment his closest collaborator chose reputation over friendship. Vince Vaughn, the 6 words that started a war. In October 2010, Universal Pictures released the trailer for The Dilemma. Vince Vaughn appeared on screen with his signature smirk and delivered 6 words that would ignite a cultural firestorm. Electric cars are gay. Within hours, the internet exploded. CNN, Variety, The Guardian, and dozens of advocacy groups condemned the line. Anderson Cooper dedicated a segment on CNN 360 to it, stating bluntly that jokes like this teach children that harmful language is acceptable. The controversy transformed from a film debate into a nationwide discussion about comedy, responsibility, and the limits of free speech. Universal pulled the trailer 4 days later. All eyes turned to Ron Howard. Howard was in Chicago, deep in post-production, when the calls started flooding in. Studio executives, journalists, lawyers, everyone wanted answers. Patrick Goldstein of the Los Angeles Times published an article titled, "What Should Ron Howard Do About Vince Vaughn's Line?" placing the director in an impossible position. A week later, Howard did something unexpected. He wrote an open letter in the Los Angeles Times defending the line, explaining that Vaughn's character spoke without thinking, and the line reflected truthful character development. The backlash was immediate. Critics accused him of hiding behind artistic freedom. Advocacy groups felt betrayed. The film became synonymous with controversy before anyone even saw it. When The Dilemma finally released, it underperformed dramatically, earning just $98 million against its $70 million budget. Reviews were lukewarm at best. The controversy had poisoned the well. For Howard, it was a harsh lesson. Comedy that once felt harmless now carried consequences. The line between edgy humor and offense had shifted, and he'd found himself on the wrong side of cultural change. Years later, Vaughn never apologized. Howard never publicly blamed him. But the experience left a mark, a reminder that sometimes defending your actors means sacrificing your own reputation. Russell Crowe, the voice that couldn't be hidden. When Ron Howard began casting A Beautiful Mind in 2000, he needed someone who could embody both brilliance and madness. He chose Russell Crowe, fresh off his Gladiator Oscar win. What Howard didn't anticipate was hiring an actor whose voice would become the film's greatest controversy. Crowe spoke with his natural Australian accent throughout filming. Howard assumed audiences would accept it. After all, Gary Oldman played Lee Harvey Oswald with a British accent. But when early test screenings happened, something unexpected emerged. Audiences rejected it entirely. Comment cards repeatedly mentioned the accent as distracting. Some thought Crowe was playing Nash as foreign, which undermined the character's American mathematician identity. Universal Studios grew nervous. Howard faced a choice: recast and reshoot, costing millions and delaying release, or bring Crowe back for extensive ADR sessions to re-record dialogue in an American accent. He chose the latter, but Crowe resisted. In interviews, he expressed frustration, claiming Howard knew his accent from day one. The actor felt his performance was being surgically altered, emotion by emotion, line by line. The ADR process took weeks. Howard sat in darkened studios watching Crowe re-perform scenes, trying to match lip movements with new pronunciations. Some lines still carried traces of his original delivery. Astute viewers could notice the difference between on-set audio and studio dubbing. The film went on to win 4 Oscars, including Best Picture and Best Director for Howard. Crowe was nominated for Best Actor but lost to Denzel Washington. In later years, Crowe rarely spoke about the experience. Howard acknowledged it in passing during press tours, but never detailed the extent of the conflict. The lesson was clear. Even when you cast the right actor, sometimes their natural gifts become obstacles. And fixing those obstacles requires uncomfortable compromises that neither party wants to make. Paul Bettany, the method that went too far. During the production of The Da Vinci Code, Ron Howard cast Paul Bettany as Silas, the albino monk assassin. Bettany, known for intense method preparation, took the role to extremes that made everyone on set uncomfortable, including Howard himself. Bettany spent months preparing. He wore colored contact lenses that turned his eyes pale red, painful lenses that irritated his corneas so severely he could only wear them for short periods. He bleached his hair and eyebrows repeatedly, damaging his scalp. He lost significant weight to appear gaunt and otherworldly. But the physical transformation was only the beginning. Bettany insisted on wearing the character's sillis, a spiked chain worn around the thigh, as self-punishment, even between takes. Crew members reported seeing bloodstains on his costume. On set, Bettany remained in character for hours, speaking rarely and only in Silas's soft, disturbing whisper. During the flagellation scene, he asked Howard if he could use a real whip. Howard refused, but Bettany's commitment unsettled everyone present. One crew member told Vanity Fair that watching Bettany between takes felt voyeuristic, like witnessing someone genuinely suffering rather than acting. Howard later admitted he had concerns about Bettany's mental state during production. When the film premiered, religious groups fixated on Silas as the most offensive portrayal. Opus Dei issued formal complaints, calling the character a grotesque caricature of faithful Catholics. The controversy intensified international boycotts. Bettany defended his approach in interviews, claiming he wanted to show religious zealotry's dangerous extremes. But for Howard, it created dual problems: an actor pushing himself to unhealthy limits, and a character that inflamed the very groups Howard hoped to respect. Years later, Bettany called the experience one of his most difficult roles. Howard never cast him again. The line between dedicated performance and self-destruction had been crossed, and both men knew it. Audrey Tatou, the star who refused to speak English. When Ron Howard cast Audrey Tatou as Sophie Neveu in the Da Vinci Code, he thought he'd found the perfect balance: a French actress to lend authenticity, who demonstrated English proficiency in previous international work. What he didn't expect was an actress who would battle him over every line of dialogue. Tatou, already an international sensation from Amélie, had specific ideas about how her character should sound. She believed Sophie's French identity was essential, and that too perfect English would betray that authenticity. Howard needed clarity for American audiences. The tension erupted during filming at Rosslyn Chapel in Scotland. A scene required extensive English dialogue exposition. Tatou performed it with a deliberately thick accent, pronouncing words in ways that made them nearly incomprehensible. Howard called cut and approached her diplomatically. What followed was a standoff. Tatou insisted her approach was authentic. Howard countered that audiences needed to understand the plot. They compromised. Tatou would perform each take twice, once her way, once Howard's way, with the understanding that Howard held final cut. But the compromise created new problems. The dual performances meant doubled shooting time. When Howard used his preferred takes in editing, Tatou felt betrayed. She later told French media that Hollywood had sanitized her performance. The film's French release became particularly awkward. Critics noted the disconnect between Tatou's international star power and her muted presence in the final cut. Some accused Howard of wasting her talents. Behind the scenes, their relationship remained professionally cold. During the press tour, they rarely appeared together. When they did, interactions were cordial but distant. Howard learned a painful lesson. Casting international stars brings cultural complications that go beyond language. It involves identity, artistic vision, and the collision between American commercial demands and international artistic sensibilities. Tatou was offered roles in both sequels. She declined. Howard never publicly discussed why, but those on set knew the real reason. Sometimes creative differences are irreconcilable. Ian McKellen, the legend who challenged every scene. When Ron Howard brought Ian McKellen aboard the Da Vinci Code as Lee Teabing, he knew he was working with theatrical royalty. What he didn't anticipate was an actor who would question, debate, and challenge virtually every directorial choice throughout production. McKellen approached the role with the precision of a Shakespearean scholar. He'd read Dan Brown's novel multiple times, made detailed character notes, and developed strong opinions about Teabing's motivations, speech patterns, and physical mannerisms. From day one, McKellen offered alternatives to Howard's staging. During the Chateau Valette sequence, Howard blocked a scene with McKellen seated. McKellen suggested standing, arguing that Teabing's passion required physical energy. They shot it both ways. McKellen's version made the final cut. This pattern repeated throughout production. A crew member told The Hollywood Reporter that McKellen would gently say, "Might I suggest?" before offering a completely different interpretation. Sometimes Howard agreed. Sometimes he held firm. But every choice became a negotiation. The tension peaked during the film's climactic revelation scene. Howard wanted subtle betrayal in McKellen's performance. McKellen believed Teabing's zealotry required theatrical grandeur. They argued for over an hour, cast and crew watching uncomfortably. Eventually, McKellen performed it his way. Howard used the take but edited it more tightly than planned, trimming what he considered excessive theatricality. When McKellen saw the final cut, he was reportedly disappointed. Despite these creative battles, both men maintained mutual respect. McKellen praised Howard's patience in interviews. Howard called McKellen brilliant but exacting. For Howard, it reinforced a truth about working with legends. Their greatness comes with unshakable conviction. They've spent decades honing their craft and don't defer easily, even to directors. The experience was exhausting but educational. Sometimes great performances require letting actors win battles. Sometimes they require the director standing firm. Knowing which battles matter defines great directing. Reno, The Silent Protest. That nearly derailed production. Reno was supposed to be the easy casting choice for Captain Bezufache in the Da Vinci Code, a French cinema icon with international appeal, someone who could bring gravitas without drama. Ron Howard learned quickly that assumptions about actors are dangerous. Reno signed on to the project with enthusiasm. But when filming began in Paris, his demeanor changed. He grew increasingly quiet between takes, responding to direction with minimal acknowledgement, performing scenes with technical precision but little warmth. Howard initially attributed it to language barriers or cultural differences. But as production continued, Reno's detachment became concerning. He would arrive on set, perform exactly what was required, and leave immediately without socializing with cast or crew. The truth emerged during a scene filmed at the American Embassy in Paris. Reno was supposed to deliver dialogue expressing frustration with American interference in French police matters. After the third take, Reno approached Howard and quietly said something that stunned everyone present. He didn't believe the character would say those lines. He felt they made French authorities look incompetent compared to American heroes. It wasn't about acting anymore, it was about national pride. Howard offered to adjust the dialogue. Reno shook his head. The issue was deeper. He felt the entire film portrayed French institutions as obstacles rather than partners. He'd signed on without fully understanding how marginalized his character would become in service of Tom Hanks's protagonist. What followed were weeks of uncomfortable compromise. Howard tried giving Reno's character more agency. Reno performed the material, but never embraced it. His performance in the final film is technically flawless, but emotionally distant, exactly what he intended. When the film premiered in France, Reno gave minimal interviews. He never publicly criticized Howard or the production, but his silence spoke volumes. For Howard, it was a lesson in international co-productions. Sometimes casting someone for authenticity backfires when that authenticity makes them resent the story being told. Wilford Brimley. The old man who made a young director. Question everything. In 1985, Ron Howard was 31 years old and directing Cocoon, a science fiction film about elderly people discovering alien rejuvenation. He needed actors who embodied both weariness and wonder. He cast Wilford Brimley, a grizzled 60-year-old character actor known for Western toughness. From the first rehearsal, Brimley made it clear he didn't take direction from kids. He'd interrupt Howard mid-sentence, dismissing suggestions with gruff remarks like, "That's not how old people act." Howard, still establishing himself as a serious director, found himself constantly undermined. During the film's pool scenes, Brimley refused to follow choreography, insisting he knew how an elderly man would move in water. Howard tried diplomacy. Brimley responded by doing takes exactly his way, forcing Howard to either use the footage or waste time and money on reshoots. The breaking point came during an emotional scene where Brimley's character confronts mortality. Howard wanted tears. Brimley wanted stoic acceptance. They argued on set, cast and crew, frozen in uncomfortable silence. Brimley finally growled, "Don't tell me how to play an old man. I've lived it." Howard walked off set to smoke and collect himself, something crew members said they'd never seen him do before. The power dynamic had completely inverted. The director had lost control. Ironically, Brimley's defiance created the film's most powerful moments. His refusal to show conventional emotion gave the character unexpected depth. The final scene, where he boards the alien ship, features Brimley's improvised calm stare into the distance rather than scripted tears. It's devastatingly effective. Cocoon became a massive success, earning over $85 million and winning 2 Oscars. Brimley's co-star Donna Meche won Best Supporting Actor, but critics noted that Brimley's performance was the film's emotional anchor. At the wrap party, Howard approached Brimley to make peace. Brimley shook his hand and said coldly, "You did good, kid, but don't ever tell me how to live." For Howard, it was formative. Sometimes the best performances come from losing control, from letting an actor's stubbornness reshape your vision into something stronger than you imagined. Jeffrey Tambor. The rage that broke Hollywood's silence. In 2018, Ron Howard's reputation as Hollywood's moral compass faced its greatest test, not from something he did, but from something he failed to do. The story involved Jeffrey Tambor, an actor Howard trusted completely, and Jessica Walter, a colleague who deserved protection Howard didn't provide. Tambor had worked with Howard for years on Arrested Development, playing the patriarch with comedic brilliance. But behind the scenes, his temper was notorious. During the Larry Sanders Show in the 90s, he'd erupt over minor issues. Crew members learned to avoid him during outbursts. The reckoning came in May 2018 during a New York Times roundtable interview with the Arrested Development cast. Midway through, Jessica Walter, who played Lucille Bluth, broke down crying. She revealed that Tambor had screamed at her on set with such cruelty that she, a 60-year veteran of the industry, was left traumatized. "No one has ever screamed at me like that before," she said, voice shaking. The room fell silent. Tambor stared at the table. The male co-stars, Jason Bateman, Tony Hale, and David Cross, immediately began defending Tambor, calling it a creative misunderstanding. Ron Howard, the show's producer and narrator, said nothing. When the interview video was released, social media exploded. Twitter flooded with condemnation. Major outlets ran headlines about Howard's silence. The man praised as Hollywood's kindest was now being accused of complicity through inaction. The timing was catastrophic. This happened during the Me Too movement, when silence was interpreted as choosing the aggressor over the victim. Netflix canceled the show's London press tour. Tambor lost sponsorships and film roles. Howard released a brief statement about sets needing to be safe and respectful. Variety called it silence dressed as neutrality. The public wanted accountability, not corporate platitudes. In a 2019 interview, Howard finally admitted, "I've realized that silence isn't always the safe choice. Sometimes silence is just another form of cowardice." It was a confession that came too late for many. The incident revealed that even good people can fail when confronted with uncomfortable truths about those they consider friends. Jackson Rathbone. The young actor who left crying. Not every difficult actor story involves legendary egos or public scandals. Sometimes the difficulty comes from youth, insecurity, and the crushing weight of auditions in Hollywood's unforgiving machine. Jackson Rathbone's experience with Ron Howard was brief but left lasting scars. In 2008, Rathbone was auditioning for a role in Angels and Demons. He was 23, coming off early Twilight fame but still desperate to prove himself as a serious actor. The audition was at Howard's production office, a room where countless careers had been launched or ended. Howard was known for gentle auditions, putting actors at ease before asking them to perform. But that day, something was different. Production was behind schedule. Studio pressure was mounting. Howard was distracted, checking his phone between takes, giving minimal feedback. Rathbone performed the scene 3 times. Each time, Howard simply said, "Let's try it again." No direction, no encouragement, just repetition without explanation. Rathbone grew increasingly anxious, interpreting the silence as failure. After the third take, Howard thanked him politely and called in the next actor. The audition had lasted less than 10 minutes. Rathbone left the room feeling hollow. What happened next became an industry cautionary tale. Rathbone sat in his car in the parking lot and cried for 30 minutes. Not from cruelty or insult, but from the impersonal coldness of the experience. He later told his agent he felt like a product on an assembly line being inspected and rejected. He didn't get the role. In interviews years later, Rathbone admitted the audition fundamentally changed how he approached acting. He became more guarded, less willing to make himself emotionally vulnerable in audition rooms. For Howard, it was likely just another Tuesday, one of dozens of auditions he'd conduct that month. But for Rathbone, it was a defining moment of professional rejection that he carried for years. The story illustrates a hidden truth about Hollywood. Sometimes the greatest harm comes not from intentional cruelty, but from the casual indifference of powerful people who've forgotten what it feels like to be powerless. Ron Howard's journey through Hollywood reveals a paradox. The kindest directors still wounded people, sometimes through action, often through silence. These 10 stories aren't about villainy. They're about the impossible contradictions of leadership in an industry built on ego, art, and commerce. Tom Hanks taught him that friendship doesn't guarantee loyalty. Wilford Brimley showed him that losing control sometimes creates greatness. Jeffrey Tambor proved that silence can be its own form of cowardice, and Jackson Rathbone reminded him that even gentle rejections leave scars. The lesson isn't that Howard failed. It's that perfection is impossible when managing human beings with competing needs, egos, and vulnerabilities. Every decision creates a winner and a loser. Every silence speaks volumes. Perhaps that's why his confession to Rolling Stone, "I wish I had the strength to get rid of him," resonates so powerfully. It's not the words of a villain. It's the exhausted honesty of someone who's spent decades trying to be good in an industry that rarely rewards goodness. If this look behind the curtain changed how you see Hollywood, share this video. And subscribe, because the stories we tell next go even deeper into the beautiful broken world of cinema.